I'm here today with writer, speaker, teacher, friend, neighbor, Jay Stewart Dixon, and we're just going to have a conversation. And that conversation is going to begin with a question that I cribbed from a podcast that I like, and that podcast always starts with the question, who is Jay Stewart Dixon to Jay Stewart Dixon?
That's a great question. All of us live and breathe and interact in this world on different levels, and we're all a slightly different person to slightly different people. And so who am I to who am I to who am I? There's the Jay Stewart Dixon that is the neighbor and the friend and has to earn a living and owns a house and is the very flawed Jay Stewart Dixon, who sticks his foot in his mouth from time to time. And then there's the Jay Stewart Dixon that is totally, completely okay. Is totally at peace. Is totally knows himself and is okay with the flawed Jay Stewart Dixon. And in one quick, short summary of our whole conversation that we're about to have, here's what happens in the spiritual badass process. In the beginning, the flawed Jay Stewart Dixon was out here, and the okay Jay Stewart Dixon was way back here. And then slowly but surely, slowly but surely, slowly but surely over the years, this happened. Boop. And now there's this. And this part kind of comes and goes. This part never moves. But the ego, Jay Stewart, flawed Dixon, most of the time it's right here. Let me out! Let me out! I'm going to stick my foot in my mouth. I'm going to be an idiot. But like, in this conversation, in this beautiful conversation, Jay Stewart kind of goes like this. And then there's this. And that's beautiful. And that doesn't stay that way. As soon as I go back up into the house, start cooking dinner or whatnot, whoop, that one comes forward. So that's who Jay Stewart Dixon is to Jay Stewart Dixon.
Can you give a very brief 3,000-foot overview of your history with spirituality and contemplative practices, when it began, what you started experimenting with, what it looks like now? Sure.
So it began when I was 18 in college. I was not happy, and the unhappiness started as a little tiny background noise, and by the time I was in my mid-20s, had turned into a screaming cacophony of unhappiness, of depression, and as I called it then, of existential depression. And I've always used that term because, fortunately and with gratitude, I was smart enough to see what I was feeling and experiencing, and by that I mean the depression and the unhappiness, as not a fundamental flaw, but an invitation to something greater. And so that's how I got involved in spirituality. I kind of went kicking and screaming into it. I say that a lot. And I'm sure glad I did, because to continue with the 3,000-foot overview, it really, really helped me to find myself and to no longer be depressed and no longer have this sense of deep existential unhappiness. I can still be unhappy, but on a very sort of surface level.
That's actually, we're going to dig into that a little bit in a minute. That's a big point from your newest book and your first book that I read that I really connected to and resonate with. What are some of the just highlights of your experimentation and education in this field? Your resume, if you will, of your experiences or whatever.
Sure. So it's pretty extensive. When I was in my 20s, after I graduated from college, I began a seeking path and journey that involved being with, sitting with, associating with, meditating with, reading with a variety of non-duality teachers. And I always joked that when I was to friends, like I had this little black book, and most guys who are in their early 20s have a little black book filled with hot chicks. I had a little black book filled with spiritual teachers where they, literally their phone numbers, maybe their emails. At the time, the internet was brand spanking new. So I don't, how can I sit with them? How can I go hang out with them? And where are they? Are they going to be near me that I could go travel and be with them? So that was, I would say, of those teachers, some of them were pretty, in the craziness level. Some of them were pretty far out there. Big gurus from India, or small American teachers / gurus. That was really the major part of my resume, was just doing all that for a good decade and a half. And then what happened after I made my own deep internal changes? What also happened is I continued my education with how can, in a way that was like, how can I now speak about, because I was interested in doing so, how can I speak about and teach this to others? So I continued, but in a more formal way, and I took mindfulness-based stress reduction courses at UVA. And some of those were the conventional MBSR course, and others were more brain neuroscience oriented. So that opened up a whole new vista of like, oh, all these things that I did, that actually modern science has now discovered the process. And I just wasn't calling it mindfulness-based stress reduction, but I actually was, for 10, 15 years, was practicing mindfulness-based stress reduction in a very, very deep way.
Right.
So essentially that's my resume. I sat with and hung out with a lot of characters.
So let's touch base briefly on your newest work, which is your book, Spirituality for Badasses. Mm-hmm. And what was the genesis of that book? And also, as an author and teacher, what are you trying to, if you had to say one thing you're trying to get people to kind of take away from the experience with the book, what is that?
So the one thing that to my core audience, the one takeaway is that everything will be okay. Everything is okay. That's the core takeaway, because my core audience are people who are hurting, people who are open to investigating a cure or an alternative modality of mental health, investigating some means of finding some inner peace and happiness. So they're new at this for most of them. And they come to this book and they are open to this book because there's some part of them that is hurting, that is in pain, that is suffering, that is depressed. And so my message right from the beginning of the book is, I am just like you, and I did these things and I'm now okay, and you can be okay too if you're hurting. So that's the main message of it, really. I'm not, if I might go scoot to the side of this question, I'm not teaching ultimate 9th stage non-dual enlightenment. The niche for that is just too small. Can't pay my mortgage. So and then what was the first part of that
just
question?
the genesis of the book and the title, and the style even behind it all?
So it came about because I was trying to find my voice, and like any author, you try what is your voice? What is your sweet spot that you're being authentic, and you're communicating to others in a way that helps them, and that resonates with enough people that you actually can, sell some books and make a living out of it. So I was trying to find my voice, and really right up, it was in 2019, I came up with this idea for a book, and it was called Evolving Depression. And it was very conventional, very MBSR, mindfulness-based, as I possibly could make it. But then I got into it and I realized, well, I'm not a neuroscientist and I don't have a PhD. That's a problem. Because if you're going to talk about spiritual development, growth from that point of view, from evolving depression and neuroscience and whatnot, you probably should have a PhD. And I don't. I have a degree, but it ain't a PhD. So, in frustration, Spirituality for Badasses was born, because shortly I tried some marketing with that and it just kind of fell flat, and I just got frustrated and I was like, fuck it, what if I just write a book that is just potty-mouthed, humorous, sarcastic, darkly me. And I did it. I just sat down and wrote the first couple of chapters of Spirituality for Badasses in literally like a day or two. And I just kind of stream of consciousness and wild and crazy, and then I put that little snippet into my marketing and it worked. I mean, I got immediate response, and emails came in, flooding in. So that's how it sort of began. I did write another book 10 years ago, which has really nothing to do. It was just sort of like, that was like the appetizer to the main course, which is what this book is.
All right, well, let's pivot into some deep waters then.
Okay.
Let's back up. And I do want to dig into and allow you to speak on existential yearning, and what I kind of took from your book as the war on lack.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read a couple of quotes, and then after that, we're going to chat a little bit. So you say existential yearning is none other than the natural force of evolution itself. It can be subtle, presenting itself in the form of curiosity, questioning, or doubting, or it can be severe, presenting itself in the form of pain, suffering, depression, or meaninglessness. Either way, it's usually experienced as a lack or a hole or a missing of something.
Yes.
And you said lack is actually, once you get to the point, lack is actually a precious gift of evolution. It's what drives you to evolve and what drives you to be more aware. Evolve the lack by cooperating 100% with it and learning from it. So can you talk a little about what you perceive and what you've experienced in that realm of lack and this existential yearning, and even not just your own experience, but experience you might have had with people who have come to you to learn or to talk about stuff like that?
So lack can be thought of as existing in two areas of your life. There's the lack that we all feel as personalities, as egos, as human beings, striving to make the next day better, striving to make a little more money at work, striving to be a better person with your family, striving, material lack, want a better car. So there's that level of lack in life, which doesn't go away, which is not the lack that I'm referring to in Spirituality for Badasses when I talk about existential yearning and the lack in evolution. That other lack, the second part, is something that not everyone is conscious of, and not everyone feels it screaming at them in close proximity at high volume. For most people, actually, that lack, the existential lack, is quite buried. It's buried behind all of the things that the lack that we're trying to address on the surface. It's buried by all of our life commitments. It's buried by all of our normal seeking life activities. But if you are fortunate enough and you are wise enough, you start to hear the voice of existential lack. And the voice of existential lack is this sort of soft calling from right here that says something is missing, something is lacking. And that part of you knows, and it's sending this message to you that no matter what you do to rearrange or arrange these beautiful seats on the deck of the Titanic, no matter what you do, it's not going to address the lack that you're feeling in your heart. And so this existential lack, this existential yearning, the reason that I view it from the point of evolution is because addressing it has an evolutionary effect on you if you go all the way with it, if you really dive deep into that lack and investigate it and listen to it and follow it, sort of like a, Pied Piper. You're listening, oh, there it is, and it kind of comes and it goes. But then, as I said earlier in our conversation, what happened in college was, in the beginning, I was just unhappy, and it was this little voice in the back. And then it grew to a loud cacophony when I was, in my mid-20s. And that basically is my saying, that's me evolving this lack, me coming closer and closer to this thing. There's no pushing it away. There's no getting rid of it. There's just evolving it and sort of changing it.
So how does beginning to notice and become aware of our ego process shift how we engage with the lack?
Well, a strange thing starts to happen is that the truer part of you, the part of you that is, I'm going to be a little non-dual here, the part of you that is the larger self, the part of you that is unconditional and not conditional, the part of you that is singular and not involved in the ups and downs and the hots and colds of this reality. It's this aware part. It's this part that we all have. It's not a big mystery. It's just the watching, witnessing, aware, silent, conscious part of you. When you begin to notice that, you also begin to notice ego. Because when you are in that position, when you are identifying with and noticing just the aware being part of you, then you can with much more ease see all of the mechanisms and all of the processes and all of the craziness, all of the seeking forward momentum of ego and personality. And so I want to paint a more tangible picture of that. When you're seated in this, personally speaking, I want to paint this picture to get, to paint a picture of what I went through. Which kind of goes back to your original question, what is Jay Stewart Dixon? Who is Jay Stewart Dixon to Jay Stewart Dixon? It's a crazy process where you sift yourself out from yourself. And you begin to, here's what I saw, is that this mechanism, I call it, I think in Spirituality for Badasses, but definitely in 21 Days, it's the ego personality project. It's a project. So ego, this is what I saw. What is ego? And I never really understood the concept of ego. And I think there are a lot of ways that you can understand it and interpret it through a lot of different psychologies and different philosophies and different religions. But in the non-dual tradition, the way that you come to see ego is that it's this thing that you're doing all the time. You're constantly basically this. You're constantly distracting yourself. You're constantly trying to entertain yourself. You're constantly trying to put a salve over a hole. The hole, you're trying to fill the hole. You're trying to fill the hole. And what I mean by this is, it's everything. It's having a conversation like this. Literally, it's even as beautiful as this is, there's a certain part of it, the ego's like, yeah, this is fun, I'm having this deep philosophical conversation. And then there's all the other, then there's all the coarser, rougher things that we do, food, cigarettes, alcohol, fast cars, women, sex, everything. You see that it's this, our phones, the ultimate distraction, right? So we're all constantly taking all of these things and we're trying to do this. And what happened, and this is what happened to me, is that I saw that none of that shit works. None of it works. And so when that breaks down, when you begin to see the ultimate futility of the ego personality project, who is the one that is seeing it? Who is the one that is seeing the breakdown of it all? And the very one that is seeing it is the self. The very one that is seeing it is the aware, conscious, clear part. And so this, 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗏 is a famous quote from 𝗦𝗨𝗶𝗿𝗏 in India and the Hindu tradition. Not this, not this, not that, not this, not this. So you see that your personality is not all of these external things, but you find that who you really are is this one clear, conscious presence. And that has an evolutionary and revolutionary effect in your life.
All right, so we'll get a little practical with this question.
Okay.
Like we just talked about, and like you write in your book, ego will never go away as long as you're alive.
Yeah.
Spiritual progress inevitably demotes, dismantles, and renders ego harmless, however. Yes. So I'm
harmless.
I'm sitting down with you. I'm just starting out on the journey. What are the first steps? What are the process of engaging ego, of examining, of becoming more aware of the process?
Sure. There's a very straightforward, in the beginning, A to B path that is like going to the gym, and that has to do with mindfulness. Mindfulness is, there's really not a whole big mystery to it. Take any college or hospital-oriented mindfulness-based stress reduction, and you're going to have some aha moments. You're going to know yourself better. You're going to uncover this aware part. It's not tricky. I teach it. It's a pretty nuts and bolts process. You just have to have the courage to do it. That's all. You just have to want to do it. You have to be hurting enough to want to like take a mindfulness course. What is involved in that? A lot of it has to do with a very easy type of meditation where you breathe, you notice your body, you notice the emotions that are happening in the body, you notice the thoughts that are occurring in the whole package, and you really get intimate with all of those layers. And you notice essentially in the mindfulness process that the normal human being, the average human being, awareness is way in the back, and then comes the body, and then emotions, and then the mind way out front, hot and bothered, you know. So you begin to see these layers when you take a mindfulness course, when you investigate mindfulness. And hey, buddy, we're doing some recording, just FYI. So that's how it begins. It's these breathing exercises. It's a relaxation exercises where you intimately take a look at each part of your body, and you do that over and over and over again. In A to B, all of a sudden, oops, you're being mindful. You're being aware. You're like, wow, this is having this benefits in my life. Okay, so that's the first half of it. Then that's the practical part. Then there's another part which then everything turns upside down.
Well, let's get to that in a second.
Okay.
I got.
Okay.
We'll work through the process a little bit because I have a couple more quotes.
Sure.
These are two quotes about the ego process and kind of contemplative psychology, and it's kind of the next step in where you're going. And we'll slowly build onto this train. We'll build the car as we're driving it.
Okay.
The first one is...
We'll build a train, not a train wreck, right?
Yes. Well, we'll see where it goes.
Okay. Either one is good. On camera, I think a train wreck would probably be better.
It would be more,
it'd be
more fun. So, he said, once you see that thoughts and breathing are pretty much exactly like the thoughts stop bothering you.
Yeah.
And then another one that really stood out to me was, okay, look, the trick is to just turn off your critical brain and have fun. So just expand on the thought process was behind those things a little bit. Like, how do we recognize that our thoughts are just like a river? They're always going to come. And then how does awareness help us to kind of let them go down the river and not drive as much?
Well, I mean, I will go back to my original foot in the mouth quote, which is that if you start to view your thoughts as this part of you, this little snarky little kid brother who just won't shut up, and you got two choices then. You can yell at the kid, you can get mad at the kid, you can hate yourself for there even being a kid, you know what? Or you can stop all that shit and just love your kid, and be okay with the kid and accept the kid. And in that, what happens is that when you do that, when you see that you can't stop it, the kid tends to just be a little quieter and a little more subdued. It doesn't mean that he or she, your little internal voice, doesn't stop. No, it always goes. Thinking always goes. And it does, and of course, thinking can, in any number of occasions, especially on the spiritual path, can recede to the background, where you're like, definitely, oh my God, I'm completely bodily in the zone and aware because I'm meditating, because I've had a glass of wine, because of this and that and the other reason. So what was the rest of that question?
Well, I think that's pretty good, because it just keeps building on, the concepts keep building on each other. In particular, I really pulled from parts 3 and 4, the tail end of your book, although the existential yearning and the lack came from the first half. I even read some of 21 Days again as well, which actually ties into this question. So you make the statement, any crisis, be it existential, personal, national, or world, is an opportunity to discover that in us which is untouched by crisis.
Yeah.
To discover that empty, clear, internal presence which is always there, always free, and like you said at the start of our conversation, always okay. In your first book, you make use of the language of experience, the magic something.
Yes.
So how is this untouched part, this always okay part, and the magic something related, and how do we continue to use contemplative practices to get into that space?
What's interesting about magic something and the untouched part, the part of you that's okay despite tragedies on a personal and state and national and world level, the untouched part and the magic something, exact same thing. I'm talking about the same thing there. When you begin to notice those parts, at first it's just soft, and you might just have little moments of it where, like, oh wow, I found my little Zen spot for 5 minutes during the day, and it's like this gift. And you might never have experienced anything like that in your life. And then you keep reading books, as I said before, you may maybe go to a mindfulness course, and then what happens is that 5-minute period turns into something that's like, wow, that lasted 20 minutes. Where I was really deeply present, my thoughts sort of receded, and I felt this, as I say, in 21 days, this magic something. There's just, I don't know what it is, but it's just magical. This presence, this feeling state where I feel good. I feel good in my own skin. I feel happy in the present moment. And so what happens is you have these tiny little aha moments, and you have more and more and more of them. And then you'll have a big one. And the big one will pretty much change your life. The big one, what we're talking about here, if you look at the Buddhist tradition, it is called a non-abiding awakening. A non-abiding awakening is what happens is when you awake to a truer, deeper part of yourself, and it pops forward, it makes you feel absolutely on fire, like awesome, and it'll last for 2 or 3 weeks, and it'll change your life, and then it'll go away. And it sucks, because it feels as though you've been dumped by the most beautiful woman in the universe, or man in the universe. And that's something to get over, is that. So it's called non-abiding awakening. And then you have enough of those, and then what happens is that one day, abiding means it abides, it stays. And then one day you have some little aha moment, or you have an experience or a shift, and the abiding part stays. But what also happens is that the experience that you have goes from honeymoon to marriage. In other words, the fireworks that you had during the non-abiding awakening for 3 or 4 weeks, those were caused by the fact that your brain had never experienced it before. And what happens is your brain acclimates to that experience. And so when you have it, the fireworks don't go off in a way that will leave you tripped and dizzy and feeling like Superman. So you enter the marriage portion of it. And the marriage portion of it is just a subtle background sense of everything being okay, and You're content, you're at peace, essentially. But you don't quite have the as I said before, the Superman fireworks of it. So as you can see, as I'm sort of conveying this, that there's a slow, I believe in the slow, gradual process. A friend of mine and a teacher of mine called it radical gradualism, I think, or gradual radicalism, I don't know. And what he meant by that was like slow, 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 bang, big opening, then slow, 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 bang, another big opening. And that's how it's done. The process of becoming, as I call it, a spiritual badass, that's how it's done.
Probably my favorite quote or page from this whole book is page 192. And I'm going to read the whole thing.
Okay.
For their sake.
Okay.
And in case you're unfamiliar with it. So I don't think you have it memorized by page, verse, and chapter. I'm going to read it. And after I'm finished, I'm wondering if you could offer us a few maybe exercises.
Sure.
To begin this whole dying before you actually die process.
Okay.
So this is one of my favorite sections of the book. It says, most people think that spiritual growth is measured in the amount of feel-goodness they accumulate. You know, all the typical fare, blissful feelings, joy, peace, meditation for long-ass periods of time, compassion, helping others, thinking good thoughts, being positive all the time, living in all the now, with the big, all that shit. But true spiritual growth, and this is the part I really like, and this is what we're just talking about.
Yeah.
True spiritual growth is measured in the number of volcanic, earth-shattering mind quakes that unequivocally and irrevocably change you at the core level of heart and brain. True spiritual growth is the stuff of bravery and courage.
Yeah.
True spiritual growth is when you invite something much, much larger than yourself in, and they'll then allow it to deconstruct you, destroy you, and rebuild you from the ground up. True spiritual growth is to die before you actually die.
Yes.
So could you speak to that and maybe give an exercise or two on dying before you die?
When I was 16, one of the really stupid things that I did, I lived in the country and there were Mennonites, and maybe 17, I can't remember. A friend of mine and I went on a semi-drunken sign stealing spree. And one of the signs that the Mennonites would put up, these weird signs, they were all about this big. And they were blue and they had some quote on it. One of those signs said, "Ye must be born again." and when I was 16 or 17, that just seemed to be the most ridiculous ass statement that I had ever heard. You must be reborn again. And I'm like, you know, the snarky little smart ass 16-year-old never even stood a chance at understanding what that meant. You must be reborn again. And I will have to say, even today, when I hear myself say that phrase, it still makes me cringe a little bit, because of the baggage that comes with it. But damn if it isn't true. But damn if it isn't true, and damn if that isn't exactly what you just read in that page. Is that it's not that you're just reborn again. I mean, that just makes it easy. If all you had to do was just pop out of a womb. No, you've got to die first. So clearly I'm not talking about an actual physical death, but I am talking about an existential death of the old identity. The old identity, when it moves out of the way completely, when it finally gives up, and throughout the process, it's a bunch of little deaths, And there might be a bigger death. And then maybe there'll even be a follow-up, you know, ultimate death. Or maybe there's death, and there's this big one, and then it tapers off again. And so this is what happened to me. By the time I arrived to the final little like release of doubt, the final little death, it was small. It was inconsequential because I had already had these big earthquakes, as I call them, these big mind quakes. I had many of them. Look at it like this: ye must be born again. This is an iceberg. And that damn thing, and the iceberg is you, your personality, and who you think you are, and all of your suffering and bullshit. And when that thing melts, pieces of it fracture and fall off, and it causes a huge tidal wave and a rumbling and an earthquake. And it doesn't matter how those pieces fall off. You know, I imagine that Ramana Maharshi, his whole damn iceberg just went poof. And you hear a lot of, you know, famous saintly guru individuals where their iceberg just seems to have gone poof, you know. And I don't believe in that. I mean, I do, it can happen, but I think more or less that it's a slow, gradual melting.
What do you think the first death is?
The first?
Is it, I mean, I know that we're all different, we're all experienced, but what do you think the first thing is for people to
you know, I recall my own first death was there's a sort of a neurotic clinging to your identity and personality, which for a lot of us probably takes shape between the ages of 16 and 21, where we're trying to refine our personality and we're trying to be, you know, we all want this, we all want to be loved, we all want to be accepted, we all want happiness, we want to fit in to some degree, not that can vary. But we want to some level for our personality to work. And I remember my own particular version of that. I wanted to be the funny guy. I wanted to be the exciting guy, the smart guy. And I think my first death was seeing that none of that shit was going to work. My first little death was like giving up on trying to build some ego personality that was, you know, cool or entertaining or funny or all the rest of that. It was, so giving up on that. And giving up on what you think who you think you are, and then I guess trying to be, you know, where you have just a little bit of distance. That's the first death, is seeing that, and having you know, maybe the first death is maybe developing a sense of humor, a self-deprecating, sarcastic sense of humor, where you realize what an idiot you are. Maybe that's the first death. Maybe that's a very common first death. I don't know. I think everyone does experience it differently, but that's probably a very large percentage of people have that.
All right. Another one, and then a curveball.
Okay, can't wait for the curveball.
But this one's actually going to be the end, and then I'm going to ask you the one before the end, because I just want to ask you it last.
Okay, sure thing.
So this is going to be the final question.
Okay.
All right.
Incidentally, Zach, the mushrooms that you put in our drinks are just starting
now
to kick
it in.
And man, good shit. I'm telling you, primo.
We were actually talking. So this is actually from 21 Days, this quote. But in your first book, you say, talking about this process, talking about your embodying of it, you're living it, and kind of the journey that you're on. You say, all this is done in the space of normal love, acceptance, and quasi-boredom.
Yeah.
It's routine.
Yeah.
So to finish our time, what are some of your regular routines and practices, maybe stuff that you did, maybe you don't do it now, but some, and I'd like, and knowing that what your interests are and stuff, you can include some of the routine things in there as well, the things that you do to get in this space. And then if there are any, this book is filled with practices. If there's anything from here that you would recommend to people as well. So what are some of the ways that you embody being a spiritual badass in your everyday life?
I think that there's nothing that I try to do, that I put any effort into anymore, that I am grinding some wheel to arrive or attain anything. That part is over for me. The benefits of all of the work that I did are ongoing, and as far as I can tell, it's been now, let me see, it was 2010, so 11 or 12 years ago that I walked into my own spiritual badass space. So I don't do anything on a regular basis other than really enjoy it, other than be it, other than derive, just have a little bit of sanity in an otherwise insane fucking world. Like, I feel as though that my day-to-day life is pretty drama-free, is pretty empty of conflict, both internal and external. I mean, I have my stresses, and of course, small and large, etc., but none of it really ultimately kind of rocks me forever. So there you go. I mean, that there's nothing I do on a daily basis regarding anything that I upkeep it. I want to say this though. I do want to say this. One of the things that if you're on your own spiritual badass journey, one of the things that needs to happen, that is paramount in the process, is this. This is one of the things, is having real human contact, is having real intimate eye contact, heart contact with someone who has been hanging around this crazy process for some time. And this doesn't mean that I suggest that you go out and get a big fat stupid guru. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you can't do this work just by reading a book. You are not going to fulfill completely 100% by reading a book. You might have some beautiful aha moments in it, but really, where does the rubber hit the road regarding this process? And it's really about human contact, which has sucked for the last year and a half. And so once we're out of this, one of the things I'm going to make, my to-do list, because I love it too. I love this kind of exchange, this kind of like human interaction is so beautiful. One of the things that you become inevitable as part of this process is that you want to have human contact, and you want to talk about what's true to you, what's truest to your heart, and it has benefits both ways. It benefits those who are also looking to find out who they are by hanging out with a group of other people who want to know who they are, just like you're doing in this class, right? But then every once in a blue moon, yeah, it's good to, and I found this absolutely to be true, to hang out with somebody who had taken the long, broken, hard, tumbled journey to the top of whatever the fuck
is at the top, and them to report back to you and say, here's how it's done, and to live it and breathe it, and so that on a deep unconscious or subconscious level, your body picks it up, your body resonates with it, your being, your mind, and it's a beautiful part of the evolutionary process where you cross-pollinate your awareness, your love, your attention with another just by hanging out with them. Throw me that curveball, baby.
Here's the curveball. The one section and the only concept that I found troubling in the book.
Cool.
And it could have been interpretation. But I'm going to frame it in a way that's a little bit more harsh than I actually intend it personally.
Okay.
But I just want your feedback on
Sure,
it.
man.
So, now, that's not to say I don't agree with this. Okay? So, you write, release the fantasy that the world, the universe, will someday in the future be a perfect paradise.
Yeah.
Now, I agree with that. Release the delusion that life in the past, either 100 years or 1,000 years ago, was somehow better. Also, 100% agree with that. Release the delusion that life in the future will somehow be better. In principle, I agree with that. So, my question to you is, as someone who has, trod the path of anxiety and depression, who's on the journey of this kind of internal ego deconstruction and a lot of faith stuff up in the air, I resonate 100% with this on a personal level. It's something I think I need, and I think other people are benefiting from it. One-on-one, I can leave a meeting like this, I can feel freer, I can feel more aware, I can see these trees with new eyes. So my question to you is, how do we take, and we can completely disagree on it. How do we take this and not allow it to just be a coping mechanism so that we don't have to go into the world and do what we can to fix some of the things that are wrong? So for instance, you and I are both white guys. Pretty reasonably educated, pretty nice.
Fortunate.
Both of us have pads that are really nice. I can see mine from here.
We're fortunate.
And there are a lot of people in the world that are not like that.
Correct.
And this kind of work might be beneficial to them on the inside, but it's not going to help them alleviate their suffering. So, what role, if any, does this work, maybe in a communal setting even, do to change the bullshit and the suffering out there?
Right. It's a really good question. And ultimately, Eckhart Tolle says that this place, this existence, this reality is meant to go wrong. It's meant to go wrong. So ultimately, if I answer that from a way pulled back place, this is a learning realm. This is a learning realm. Things are meant to go wrong so that you learn. So that one way or another, your ass gets burned. One way or another. And that is for everybody. And everybody is going to get their ass burned in a variety of different ways, in harsh ways. You and I are experiencing the ass burning in a much lesser way, and we're just fortunate for that.
Like a bad hot dog.
Like a bad hot dog, first world problems. And then there are those out there that are experiencing it in a horrible, horrible way. And how do you like decipher your own middle class white privilege from individuals who live not but
6 miles from us in downtown Charlottesville who don't have that? How do you make heads or tails of that? And I guess my answer to that is love thyself first. So here is how that example of loving thyself first plays out in reality. You know, I until 2 weeks ago did contracting. So I worked with power tools with a bunch of good old boys on various projects where I installed the AV, and plumbers, electricians, carpenters, and these guys are not sophisticates whatsoever. But love thyself means when I show up, I'm not trying to be some highfalutin, this. I'm not doing that. But what I am able to do and give and to be with them is somebody who, likes them. Somebody who can respect them. Somebody who's like, yeah, man, when I'm not doing this, I can't wait to get off because I'm going fly fishing tonight. And, but before that, I'll tell you what, this job has gotten to me. I'm going to have a few beers, then I'm going fly fishing. And you ever fished that river before? And like, oh yeah, I love fishing that river. So what I'm saying is that you meet people where they are. And if you can love yourself completely and fully, it becomes real easy to meet people where they are. If you want to. And if they're open to that. I'm not suggesting that, you go into a really bad section of town and meet some guy who's drunk and belligerent on the street who's carrying. You don't go meet that guy. You avoid that guy. But for those who are, who cross your path in this life, who are less fortunate than you are, who are less educated than you are, who don't have the white privilege that we have, that don't have a backyard like this, you interact with them in a way where you meet them where they are. And that's what spirituality for badasses is. It's meeting them where they are. You're right about that. It's like, there is a part of the process where you do indeed kind of like have to say, okay, at one point, I'm going to let it all go. You transcend the whole fucking pie. And that means that you've got to be completely, utterly, absolutely selfish about what it is that you want with your own evolution. And you've got to grab that thing and hold on. And be absolutely, maniacally, completely selfish about it. In other words, I am unhappy. The voice of this unhappiness is screaming to me, and I need to answer that. I need to answer that first before I can fix anything or everybody else. That has got to come first. And if I don't do that, I'm no good to them. I'm no use to them. But if you answer that first, then you will find that your ability, your capability, your gifts, and how you interact with them is so much better. It comes out in a way, in its own unique way that it was meant to come out. So I get it. Like, is it responsible of us to go on this wild, introspective journey? And then how can we do that without, ignoring or being responsible to our families and to our neighbors and to our friends and to our children and to our community? And I've always had umbrage with that myself. You see all these teachers out there and they don't have children, they don't have families, they're just solo tour, satsang, meditative tour, and it's like, that ain't real. That's not real. I mean, I got a fucking mortgage and a family and a, you know, and a child, and I like those things, and I want to make them happy too, and I want to help them as well. Well, I guess what I am and what Spirituality for Badasses is living fucking proof that you can do both. That you don't need to sell your soul to some spiritual teacher or guru or teaching or whatnot and go on a world tour with them. You don't need to do that. You can be smart about it. You do need to have, you know, at some point, yes, you need to be, as I said, you need to be maniacally selfish for a very short time. Or just for 15 minutes a day.
Well, that's like saying you go to the doctor and you find out you have a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
It's not selfish to be like, I'm going to do whatever I can to get better.
Yeah.
Because you healthy, whether it's mentally, spiritually, or physically, you healthy is better for the whole world than you sick.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it makes sense.
Does that, are we, so then, does that passage now make more sense
Absolutely.
to you?
Because you are going to be of more use in whatever situation you find yourself in.
Yeah.
Being more whole, being more healthy, being more aware than less. And I think that's really what I see as like a fundamental problem when I come up with people that aren't interested at all in other people.
Yeah.
Is because they haven't done the work. And like you said earlier, the more I'm aware, the more I sink into this, the more I'm aware of you.
Yeah.
And so the real work is I begin to see everybody through the lens that I can process my own self.
The more you know yourself, the more you as the process unfolds, the more you start to see your glaring faults, your glaring glaring parts of your ego, the stupid things that you do, which again don't all necessarily go away.
Right.
You know, you see all those things, and then this beautiful, tragic, compassionate thing happens. Is that when you start seeing it in yourself, you start to see it in everybody else too, and then what happens is you have a choice at that point. You look out upon the tragedy or comedy or both that is the world and the people in it, and you have a choice. Ignore it and it's an illusion, you know, just meditate with me, you know, and go in your cave or let all that stuff go, or you play cleanup, which is an impossible frickin' job. You play cleanup, where one person at a time, you try to help them the best way that you possibly can, using whatever gifts and skills that you have. You get your broom out, you get your dustpan out, and as an impossible task, but you do it anyway, and you start helping and cleaning up, one person, one heart, one soul at a time.
All right, this wasn't on my list. I'll end with this. Well, I'll end with the other one, but I'll ask. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's been great.
Awesome.